Hey, everybody, welcome to a special show, Global Politics, Trump, United States, and the world. We're going to have a fun conversation about this, so I hope you guys enjoy it. Get your comments and thoughts in the chat, pro or negative, whatever. Obviously, be respectful, but apart from that, let's get into it and have a bit of fun. So, Global Politics, Trump obviously been in for almost 4 weeks, I think it is, and already doing an incredible job. So, amazing stuff, moving at 100 miles an hour. So pretty incredible there. So Trump, global politics, United States, and the world. Let's get into it. So we're going to start off with a bit of a picture of the world, of course. This is really what Trump is going to impact, is the world. So it's going to be pretty incredible. We've already seen a move from a lot of domestic politics moving into global positioning now in the last week. So it's going to be pretty exciting to see that. We've got BitFitness announced the USA politics is the most exciting thing that's taken place in our political lifetime. Certainly is Bitfinex, that's for sure. Now, we've obviously got the United States there is a ginormous. Let's just think about it. 880 billion US dollars military budget, maybe around about 5% of the world's population, but 20% of the world's GDP. I think last time I checked, it was about $25 trillion. It is the global consumer, the global police, and of course, is typically been the bastion of freedom, at least until recent years when you've got people that are pushing socialism, authoritarianism, and a lot of corruption. So, but Trump is in now, looking to clean house and return the United States into the golden era, right? So, bring back freedom, support democracy, and decrease the government. So those are some of the initiatives that he's doing, and he's come out of the gate like a lion. So it's been pretty interesting. But now in the last week, he's moved quite strongly into foreign policy, and so we're going to look at a bit of that. So let's first look at obviously Israel and Gaza, the conflict there in the Mediterranean. Kind of see it in the map there above next to Egypt. There's a little tiny little area. But let's see if we can zoom on that. And let's go on more time there. And so you can see Israel, Gaza there, obviously the conflict there between Hamas terrorists and Israel Defense Forces. And of course, they have pretty much bombed, a heck of a lot of it. It's pretty much rubble, a lot of it. There's still standing buildings, but it's pretty rubbish. You've got United Nations, Egypt, Lebanon, and other types of aid going into the Gaza Strip. But of course, there needs to be a resolution trying to get all the October 7 kidnapped people out as well. There is a deadline by midday Saturday, and it looks like Hamas is coming to the party to some degree. We'll see where that ends up, though. But they were not going to let out prisoners, then going to let some out. So we'll see whether they get them all out there. We don't know how many of them are actually alive, so that's going to be the big issue there. But anyway, Trump came out with a pretty innovative idea. Well, if you just let them take the area again, you're just going to rinse and repeat exactly what we've seen for decades. And so he basically said, well, United States owns it, right? And so that caused a lot of fuss. People were going, what the heck are you talking about? What the heck are you talking about? Because people were going, you're gonna own it? What does that mean? I mean, it's supposed to be the Palestinian people in Gaza, for example. But of course, they elected Hamas, 2007? And of course, it's been a terrorist state ever since, right? So you have Egyptians and Lebanese and Syrians don't want to take the Palestinians precisely because when they did last time, they caused internal strife and takeovers in Lebanon and Syria. So people may not be familiar with that. But when they did last time, it caused a lot of trouble because you got this ideology, right? This radical ideology. It's very difficult. And they train the kids to have the same ideology. So it's pretty tough, right? You got to sort of deprogram them. And so Trump's talked about, well, I'm just going to block that. I'm just going to come and say, oh, we're taking it over. Obviously, US troops, he said, are not going on the ground, but Israel will basically guard the area. And then he's talking about getting in development, right? We're going to do a lot of development in the Gaza area. And so and then he's been on the phone talking to members in the Middle East. It would probably be Saudi, Egypt, Lebanon. He's already had the king this week, the king of Lebanon, coming at it. Very good conversation there, I thought, and talking about taking 2,000 children, which are in high medical need, to address their issues. And so that was a big shout out there from the King of Jordan. I think it was a very humanitarian position. So that's kind of the opening slather. What conversations are going on behind the scenes? Obviously, Trump there looking forward to finishing off the Abraham Accords, of which he created peace in the Middle East for the most part. Obviously, you've still got Iran. That's Iran there. That's still essentially 90% of the people essentially hate the administration in Iran, the religious zealots that run it, but they still control Iran. And of course, they're trying to get nuclear weapons. So you got a couple of things going on here. Obviously, Iran and all its proxies, including Yemen, with the Houthis down the bottom there, causing a lot of trouble in the Straits of Hormuz there, and impacting shipping lanes. And of course, you've seen a lot of naval fleets going in there, and of course, them firing rockets at them, firing rockets at Israel, all that sort of stuff going on. So it's been quite carnage there with Yemen. Yemen, of course, just announced that they're going to attack the United States and Israel. So still standing strong there in the good old Yemen, but they are getting beaten down. No really offensive by the West has been taken on them yet. They've had a bit of tit for tat, but not much else. And so that's kind of where we are. Although Israel did do a bit of a shock and awe bombing there in Yemen at some stage, about a month ago or so. So we're going to see United States to own the Gaza Strip there. Are we going to? That is really a new idea. It kind of forces the hand of Hamas to give up some hostages and move forward with that. So that's going to be pretty interesting to see how that all plays out on Saturday midday. And of course, what phone calls are being happening with a lot of these Arab states in the Middle East, talking about doing developments, property developments in Gaza. Obviously, Trump is a property guy, right? Property real estate guy. So let's see where that all heads. Now, if you've ever seen pictures of it, it is really a lot of rubble around the place, very unsafe. There's still tunnels that have not been discovered, booby traps, bombs everywhere. Really is pretty difficult. Now, that being said, there is a lot of aid getting into there. People pretend there's not a lot of aid, but there's plenty of videos of tons of trucks, plenty of good feeds going on there. It's difficult conditions in the tents, particularly tents that are run down. But if you have got a better, if you're still in a house or you're in a new tent, then it's not so bad. But no one wants to live really in a tent. So something has to be done for, the 1.5 million to 2 million people in Gaza there. So we'll see how that all lays out the land. So we've still got to wait, see what's going to come up with the Arab states. What has Trump got up his sleeve? And I imagine that those negotiations are going to be pretty interesting in terms of development. I think it's actually a good path forward. So we'll see where that leads. And of course, we did see not just the king of Lebanon come, but also Jordan, but king of Jordan. But we also saw the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu also turn up at the White House. In fact, the first person to turn up there as a head of state. And they had a pretty productive conversation. That's when all this stuff came out around Israel there. So obviously Trump is very much anti-war. He wants to just get the wars over. He wants peace to come to the Middle East. I don't know if you guys remember, but in his first term as president of 45, he actually went and spoke in front of the Saudis and other Arab leaders and gave a very, very incredible speech. If you haven't checked it out, go look for it. But Trump talked about, you've got two options. You got peace and prosperity in the Middle East, or you've got terrorism, right? So he was basically saying it's time for you to root out the terrorism and, be in the modern world and be prosperous. And I think that was pretty well received. And we've seen a number of Abraham Accords followed suit. So it was a pretty powerful speech there. If you haven't seen that out, really is Trump at his best. It was pretty incredible. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. I think we're going to get a lot of more countries coming into the Abraham Accords. So that's going to be probably progressing as well. So a couple of key issues, obviously Gaza, that's going to play out. We'll see that probably in the next couple of weeks. The Abraham Accords be expanded. We may see pretty much alliance between Saudi Arabia and Israel come up in that peace process as well with the Abraham Accords. And then also the other one is Iran. How they deal with the nuclear issue there. The other big thing is that the United States, handed over through Trump, handed over to the Prime Minister of Israel about 3,700 bunker bombs, buster bombs there, potentially for Iranian hit there on the nuclear capabilities. Now, Iran's pretty close. You've got to have another components to get there, enriched enriched heavy water. I think they still use that process. So they've still got a little while to enrich uranium. And yeah, so let's see where that goes. Obviously, Trump's going to try and turn on the every single kind of restriction they can on Iran to force them, to come to the table there. So we'll see how that plays out. There's still many more information about the Iranian process, but that's typically what Trump will do. Although things have moved on since his first presidency. So we'll get a bit more information about that. The other thing is, of course, Iran was presented from selling its oil. They typically had to, if you've seen plenty of videos out there, they truck their oil over, all sorts of techniques to try and get the oil transported to other countries that buy it. And so that's been a big issue there for Iran. Now, most of the Iranian people don't like the regime in Iran. And of course, they are definitely trying to, they would love to overthrow the Iranian government and become part of the modern world and live in peace and have a proper administration. So we see protests just this week in Iran, again, for those people trying to push a revolution there to some degree in Iran. Now, remember, the last Iranian revolution got us this terrible leadership and, of course, put Iran backwards. But the majority of Iranian people are getting sick and tired of the religious control and stuff like that. So we're going to see how that goes coming up there. Number of different aspects happening in Iran there. So that is where we are there. That's in the United States. Let's see if we've got any comments before we move on into Ukraine, because I think that's another big piece of the foreign policy. Let's have a look here. But Vanessa says Palestinians prime. Gaza say they don't want to leave Gaza. They're the same kind of Palestinians, people who are living there. West Bank, why not put the Gazans in with the other Palestinians? Yeah. So most Gazans, of course, from since about 1840, 1860, I think, that came from Syria, Egypt, and Jordan. So that's where most of them are from. And they came in over that period of time. And of course, that was under the British mandate as well, including Turkey and British mandate. So we'll see where that lands and what happens there. So still up for grabs, and let's see if Trump's approach brings a solution there. I think for anyone with reasonable point of view wants to see any killing, any war finished, but justice must be done to some degree. So we'll see what happens in that area. But a number of key things happening there, as we just talked about. The other thing, we're going to move over to Ukraine. You got Ukraine, of course, and Russia. Obviously, Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, the problem with on the positive side from Putin's point of view is that the NATO and that were moving east, right? They were supposed to had agreed not to move too close to east, particularly to the former Russia USSR states, but NATO couldn't help themselves and keep pushing the border. So, from Russia's point of view, that's you've lost the gap, and you've got the Western Europeans. They're smashing up against their borders, which I didn't like. On the western side, of course, you've got the Russians, going into Ukraine, and also potentially risk to Poland and places like that. So that's kind of the old issue there. And if you know the history of Poland, Poland is a very, very a European power that's very associated to its identity, very Christian, strong country. The only country, as far as I know, out of all the Europeans, to not let migration in. And of course, they don't have the crime levels because of that. And like the rest of Europe, which, immigration's been a huge problem. We're also getting that down in New Zealand, Australia. That's definitely something that's happening. It's all planned. None of this has just happened. It's all part of, globalist and globalist people. This is what they see happening, right? So that is where we are at the moment. Now, obviously, we've seen Ukraine there. It's had obviously brutal war, something like 1.5 million men killed on both, combined on both sides. So it is a bloodbath, and it's a waste of human life. This is I talked about this in another live stream, but World War II was kind of a necessary war because you had fascist governments like Adolf Hitler doing terrible things, and so you had problems with that. You had the Japanese Imperial Army butchering people in China and everywhere else. So they had to be stopped. Right? But here in this war is not really of one of those magnitudes. It really is pointless, and a whole young generation of Ukrainians and Russians are being wiped out. If you've seen any footage, it is absolute bloodbath. It's pointless stuff. And you see people get out of armored vehicles, they jump onto the ground, there's a bomb, their legs get blown off. I mean, it's horrendous stuff. So, it really does need to stop. The other thing is that many may not know is that Ukraine is in a pre-stage to join the European Union. So what that would mean is that as the young men, if we could do to return home, there's going to be less of them in the Ukrainian youth. They return home, and the cities, a lot of the cities are bombed, of course. They return home, and then suddenly they join and get EU membership, and then suddenly immigrants from non-European immigrants come in and they flood the country, just like they have Spain, France, Germany, and the rest of Europe. And they then take over anyway, right? So they lose their country. So they're going away to fighting for the country. They get back to civilian life. They join the EU. They get EU membership, and then they're going to take all the immigrants that come in, and of course, then they basically lost their country. So they're really in a bad situation there under the Zelensky's leadership there. So we'll see how that plays out. Trump, of course, really hates death, and I think we can all say we hate death. So I think that trying to get a resolution here is the only way to go. Now, the Western Europeans there, France, Germany, and all that, they love wars, right? They love wars. They seem to love death. They love having a boogeyman, right? Russia, the boogeyman. And in this case, I think that they're really in a bad situation. They obviously rely on the United States for the military in NATO. It is the dominance. Trump, of course, in his first term as President 45, was pushing them to go to 2% of their budget. They were all very short. I know Germany is, I think, headed towards that now. But they're still relying on the US. Now, what we saw as well from that is we saw Vice President J.D. Vance go to speak in Germany there today and cause quite the fuss, telling them, you guys are attacking freedom of speech. You guys need to, make sure you got freedom of speech. You're going to have this democracy you talk about. Because obviously EU is a lot of unelected bureaucrats. They're very globalist, very authoritarian, and they have been removing freedom of speech and also pulling out elections, so cancelling elections. And this is sort of tyranny they were getting into. So I guess they just can't help themselves moving back into tyranny there. And so J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, basically saying, hey, not interested in that. You guys really need to look at yourselves. Freedom of speech and untamed immigration into the country is causing crime and poverty and lots of other problems. So mass murders, where there's murders there constantly. Sweden, France, Germany. I mean, they're just suicide. Islamic terrorists coming and cutting people's head off and all sorts of grotesque things. And so he's saying, you guys look at yourself, create yourself as look after your citizens. So that's kind of where he's at the moment. So it was a beautiful speech. I haven't seen that J.D. Vance out there today. Of course, the Europeans, shocked and awed. One of the federal defense minister for Germany, responding back at the same conference, and that, no, we do have speech. We do allow people to stand up, talking about the AfD in Germany, which is kind of the populist party. They want to close immigration and tidy up crime and do all the common sense things, really. And of course, the globalists are like, no. We want to have terror. We want to have death. We want to have war with Russia. All this terrible stuff. So J.D. Vance really put it to them, and so we're going to see where that ends up. The other thing is that we've seen other people in the Trump's cabinet, Secretary of State, doing some good things. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But let's get back to Ukraine. So at the moment, they're in negotiations. So we know negotiations going on between Russia. President Trump, of course, had a conversation with President Putin, has a conversation with Zelensky. Zelensky's a wild card, but he really is in the weaker spot here. Obviously, Russia is in the strongest spot. Russia obviously has taken quite a bit of land. So that is a big issue for Zelensky there. Now, the Western Europeans want to have forever war. They'll just keep funding it, just like the Democrats did under Biden, and they'll just keep funding this war, right? Bloodshed, pointless bloodshed for the people on the front line, and so they're going to lose, part of this. In they won't have the 2014 boundaries anymore, right? So this is going to be changed, and they're going to have to give up land. It's just going to be the way it is if you want to stop the bloodshed. Otherwise, you're going to have a forever war. And this is what Russia's typically done. They will double down, and the Europeans there will, fund. But if the Europeans ever put troops into Ukraine, then that would be pretty much an opening for Russia, potentially use special weapons, even low-yield nuclear weapons. And, of course, none of us want to get into that. So it's probably better off just to give up part of this Black Sea area and stuff like that, and let it be, and then get Ukraine can then get redevelopment. Trump obviously part of the funding of this. I think they've funded several $100 billion already into Ukraine. Then they would also secure the rare earths there as well. Now, there's more controversy in Ukraine, of course. There's these so-called biolabs that are there, and other bad things happening in Ukraine. Many of them funded through the Democrats while they were in power. So there's lots of dark stuff happening in the old Ukraine there before the war even started. So there's other issues, not just the war that's going on there. So we'll see where that lands. Obviously, Russia and Ukraine are both big wheat producers in the world. That impact of this war has had impacts on the African continent, particularly. They are the biggest ones that get hit by the lack of food and wheat. So these big food flows have a big impact in the market as well, something that people may or may not be aware of. So pretty important there as well, because Russia has a lot of flatlands, and so does Ukraine, and so the war's pretty flat. During the winter, of course, it gets pretty bogged down. It's pretty difficult fighting conditions there as well. We saw recently the North Koreans as well sending some troops there, completely unprepared for the battle, and pretty much getting taken out pretty easy for the most part. Not used to drone warfare as well. Drone warfare has been accelerated in Ukraine. That is going to be a new feature. We also see that in the United States, the cartels potentially trying to use some sort of drone warfare on the southern border, because whose drones are bigger? The United States has very advanced large drones, so probably a bit of a danger thing there for the cartels trying to pull that one off, especially along that big border there. So that's kind of where we are there on Ukraine. Now, obviously, the JD Vance came out with that. We also saw the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, there. He's starting to take on his role. He obviously was a Fox News guy. He was, it's hard to go from presenting the news to then becoming the Secretary of Defense, which is, you're the second in command of the strongest military in the world. Like I say, $880 billion annual budget. And of course, I think he's just starting to morph into it quite nicely, leading by example, of course, training with the troops in Germany, really doing impressive there. And of course, I think he's actually, it's only going to take him a few weeks to get into that role. And I think he's getting there. I've definitely noticed some change from week to week. So a good start there. Now, he obviously has been giving talks about the potential agreement between Ukraine and Russia, and of course be involved in the conversations there. Also had meetings with NATO. So he's been talking about that with NATO, about their commitment to NATO, but also pushing the NATO that maybe, in Trump's first presidency, go up to 2% of budget, but now maybe this time head up towards 5% to defend your own military. Not that the Americas won't be there for them, but the Europeans need to up their game. So some of the response from particularly the federal defense minister was to firstly reject some of the JD Vance criticisms, which were all valid, by the way. It was the German one. They just seem to love war and stupidity for some reason. But the Secretary of Defense did say that, we're going to increase our own budget, but we put a budget outside of our formal budgets. So you have an informal budget for defense, and therefore you can have a huge blowout on your defense budget. So you still got to get the income from somewhere, right? Now, the other complaint that was also made was that Germany and other countries had deindustrialized. As you guys know, the Germans have made such huge mistakes with closing down all the nuclear power stations, and therefore pushing this climate agenda, which is a bit of a make-believe, and then shutting down all the nuclear reactors, then suddenly getting in conflict with Russia and Ukraine, and then suddenly having to turn around and buy gas from Russia. And yet they were closing down the nuclear power plants and deindustrializing as well. As you guys know, Germany has some of the best engineers in the world, but then started reducing their industrialization and moving away from nuclear power. It was a disaster. These guys really are idiots, and so they get called out there, not only by the vice president, but also by the Secretary of Defense there, about you guys need to step up for that. So the other thing that we saw. Also, we saw the Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, there. He's been sent also to the Ukraine to claw back probably some money, there's no doubt, and to also secure some deals around these special rare earths If you're not familiar with special rare earths, there's about over a dozen of them, probably 14 or 15 of these rare earths. They're used in all modern technology like cell phones, computers, and of course, the 2/3 of those special rare earths are actually held by China. So China controls a lot of supplies. So you see, it's a real upside down resource fight going on here, and very interesting that Trump would isolate those rare earths in the Ukraine as part of any deal. So pretty interesting there, what's going on. So that's kind of some of the stuff that's happened there just in the last couple of days as Trump's moved on for his foreign policy, and we're going to expect that to progress further there. So deals with NATO and Europe, strengthening that, asking for more money, also dealing with the Ukraine-Russia issue, dealing with the issue of Israel and Gaza, and of course the Abraham Accords, as well as the Iranian issue there. So a lot of different things going on there for the Trump administration foreign policy. Just begun, so it's just early days. Obviously, closer to home, dealing with Mexico and dealing with Canada, both from tariffs, and also those tariffs are designed to claw back a lot of manufacturing to the United States that has been let go over the last couple of decades, that have been picked up by China and a lot of the Southeast Asian countries, which have pulled out the manufacturing. Now, interestingly enough, quite a few of the Southeast Asian countries have started eating in on China, right? Because China's welfare is going up. A lot of people have moved from the rurals to the cities, and now people, some of the Southeast Asian countries are actually more cost competitive to produce certain mass commodity items. So there's been a bit of competition that China's faced. Now, China, of course, has this Beltway program, and of course, that is a lot of people see that as really a sign of imperialism through debt traps, right? So debt traps. So that's one of China's commercial ways of taking over the world as it wants to be the #1 global power. Now, nothing's inevitable. You may have heard over the decades liberal and progressive policymakers say, "Oh, United States is in decline and China's on the rise," right? But of course, nothing's inevitable. It's just your positioning. And of course, we've got Trump leading the United States. He's saying, no. It's the golden age for the United States. Just like when he was in President 45, he helped stop that whole narrative of convergence. So that's where the national income of China converges with the US. He said, no, we can do this. And he started opening up the oil and gas, started opening up the industry. And of course, you see the United States start pulling away again. So nothing's inevitable there. And Trump was on the right path. So, liberal economists have been a disaster. In fact, handing over more power to the rising China, right? So that has been a big issue. Now, another issue, of course, that we have with China is that they've got this form of imperialism going on. They say one thing: we're multipolar, we're taking over the UN, right? So they're secretly taking over UN there. They're using lots of mechanisms like political levers to take over politically places, as well as forcing favors. Now, one of those most recent is actually close to home to New Zealand, of course, is where I am from. And of course, they have put pressure on there. What have they done? You say, what have they done? Well, they have gone to the Cook Islands here. So you got Australia over here, you got New Zealand down the bottom here, and you got the Cook Islands sitting off here out in the middle of the Pacific. It is a beautiful place with a beautiful people over here. In fact, they have quite a lot of similarity as opposed to where Maori may have come from. Very likely to have a similar language, similar looking people for where the Maori, which are the native people of New Zealand, along with the Moriori and of course the Pakeha, which is I am a Pakeha. So there we go. That's pretty much here where we are. It's an absolutely beautiful place in the Cook Islands. They are beautiful people, but they have made a deal here, which I think is a big mistake. See the Cook Islands here, a number of Cook Islands out here, and beautiful country. I mean, you can see how beautiful it is, surrounded by this beautiful green water here with the beautiful mountains and stuff like that. It's an absolutely gorgeous place. And so a bunch of islands out in the middle Pacific, and it's a crazy place to be, right? So the Chinese have come all the way down here to do a Beltway program, debt the Cook Islands, so the Cook Islands can build stuff, right? And now Cook Islands is typically under the sovereignty or purview of New Zealand. They have particular agreements which was signed by a prime minister that we had many years ago, and of course the idea was that people, New Zealanders can go stay there, all that sort of stuff. but we also give them finance to help, to help build stuff over there. Now they have just done a deal. They have just done a comprehensive strategic deal with China, and of course, China doesn't give out things for free because China is well known for taking out ministers and voting and manipulating voting outcomes, all to favor China as it expands out into the Pacific there. So China there making a big move from China, moving outwards into the Pacific. And of course, they want to get this, they take the long view. They want to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And so that is a big news. So that you can see how strategic the Cook Islands is out there. Very strategic indeed. You got Hawaii just above it there, which is obviously quite a big distance. But you've got Cook Islands there, and then you've got New Zealand and Australia down the bottom there. What else have we seen? Well, at the moment, we've got Australia and the United States having military runs, trials over here, practicing the military up in the northern Australia there. And what do we find? We find the Chinese naval fleet send some ships and airplanes issues here just at the top of the north of Australia at the moment. So that's how far down the Chinese are at the moment, testing and almost terrorizing the Australians down here. Meanwhile, they're over in the Cook Islands making these debt deals, basically debt entrapment. And what they typically like to get is to get a port, right? Get a port, pretend it's a civilian port, but really they could use it as a military port at any time. So this is sort of some of the problems that we're getting here as well. And once you get a contractual relationship, you're really getting yourself indebted to that person, in this case, the Chinese. And it could be very, very bad indeed. You can see the expansion all the way out here now into the Pacific. And the Chinese already knew that New Zealand already had an arrangement with them, and they didn't tell New Zealand. So New Zealand was completely blindsided both by Cook Islands and by China. And so the foreign minister in New Zealand, the deputy prime minister, Winston Peters, didn't know anything about it. So you can see the games are afoot, folks, even with Trump in leadership. And so, obviously you got China down in Australia trying to pressure the Australian-American alliance and already showing some strength there. They also had an aeroplane, a fighter jet, fly past an Australian military plane and throw out some flares, which could have damaged it, especially if it gone into the turbine of the transport plane. So you can see that things are really ramping up there down at the Australia. And Australia, they've also got ships also in that sea near the ocean there, not in the 5 mile or 7 miles exclusive zone, but in the exclusive zone outside of Australia, these ships. So there's a lot of games afoot going on there you may or may not be aware of, depending where you are. So even while you're sleeping, while you're trying to go play soccer, there's these big plays being made by China at the moment. Now, obviously, the big thing that we're trying to avoid with China, of course, is Taiwan, right? So Taiwan there is what we're trying to avoid. Let me just pull this up here. So Taiwan down here, that's the thing that people are worried about, that China tries to go into Taiwan. Now, Taiwan has obviously been an economic miracle. They have done amazing stuff. So we're worried, obviously, that China wants Taiwan to be part of China. And obviously, Taiwan, what do they have? They have the microchip processing. They're the heavyweight in microchip processing. Obviously, a lot of the design still comes from the United States, but a lot of the processing is in Taiwan. And of course, part of the tariffs there is, Trump's trying to build back this manufacturing capacity that includes chip technology and manufacturing, not just steel and copper and other things, steel and aluminum, things that Trump is focusing on there. So that is going on there. So far, we've heard nothing from them. Some people think that they may use ships to take Taiwan. Other people are now thinking that they may just do an air attack on Taiwan. But obviously in Japan, you've got Japan up here, with Japan's got obviously the US naval fleet's got Japanese are now militarizing as well, giving away their pacifism from World War II, realizing that they can no longer sit and do nothing with China, continuing to militarize as the number 2 military. Japan's still sitting with a budget which is number 3 in the world for militarization, and they're starting to really ramp that up. So you're getting a bit of a pincer movement there. So you've basically got Japan, United States, the Philippines, you've got Australia there, just checking the power and expansion of China there as well. Now, obviously, everyone wants China to be modern and prosperous and be a good global partner, but you also got to hedge it in from its obvious imperialistic goals. Now, if you're not aware, in the 20th century, of course, China had the problem of a massive amount of deaths there from Japan. So there is this sort of old, wound, as it were. Just like in North Korea has kidnapped a lot of Japanese people, and of course that's a sour point with Japan. So you got all these sour points between these people. Obviously, North Korea and South Korea, and the DMV are sitting in there as well. Obviously, with something like 70% of North Korea's military is on the border, southern border, facing in South Korea, with all its guns and everything else like that. And obviously, North Korea has got nukes. Some say maybe about 30 nukes or so in there as well. So that's some of the issues you've got going on there. You still got the conflict North Korea and South Korea. You've still got the Taiwanese and China. Now, remember last time when Trump was in power, he actually walked over the DMV over in North Korea with President Kim, and that was a pretty positive relationship there. Now, obviously, President Kim is a tyrant. If you know anything about their prisons, they have 3 tiers of prisons, from labor camps to political prisoner camps. And if you go to a political prisoner camp, you're pretty much not ever seen again, right? Spies that have come out of North Korea have said that once you go to one of these prison camps, he's never seen anybody come back from them. So basically, you're there till you're dead. And so that's the kind of person you're dealing with there as they keep their political power, right? Now, obviously, for China, North Korea is a nice little knife in the side, right? So it's a good little knife in the side that China has and has that relationship with. So they're quite happy to have that little thorn on their side, even though it can cause them problems from time to time. So that sort of stuff going on there at the moment with Asia. So yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting to see that play out. Let's see what other comments we've got in the chat there, and I'll continue on with our global politics, Trump, United States, and the world, which I thought would be a bit of fun show to do. Let's see what else we've got here. We've got Bifanestia. So Al Qaeda took over Syria like we wanted. Was it Bashar al-Assad ran into Russia, and so now Al Qaeda will run Syria. How's that better? It's not better. Trump so far has just left that alone for the moment. We shall see. It's a question mark there. Let's see whether they can do what they've never done before, which is actually run a state properly rather than run it as a terrorist state. So question mark there. But for next, good question though. How many Arab states want Israel to exist? More and more. So with the Abraham Accords, there's going to be more and more of them that accept it. They may not want it to exist, but they accept it, and then they do business with it because they sort of respect the fact Israel stands its ground. Now in the Middle East, power counts, right? Weakness is you get taken out with weakness, but strength is respected in the Middle East and Arab states. That's always been a well-known fact, and of course Trump is kind of that lion, right? The alpha lion. And so I think they respect him as well. And if you've ever seen him go over to some of those states, they really roll out the carpet for him there. It says the Gulf of America on Google Maps now instead of Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, I'm not even sure. Did it say that on this one? Let's go have a look and have a look on this map. Let's see here. Does it say it on my map? Might say it on your map, but does it say it on mine? Well, on my map, it's got Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America. So they will probably depend on where you are in the world. You know how Google plays games. Remember, they are left wing, so just take that into account. Tell Iran that only something gays have nuclear weapons. Yeah, I know about that one. Let's try to keep the language friendly, whether we agree or not with those behaviors. The CIA is at war with populism. They want to brainwash the world into trusting institutions. Yeah, well, they're going to be under threat from Trump's clean out, right? So they're going to be under threat from China's clean out, moving back to domestic policy in the United States. So they're definitely going to face that. What does Putin want? Does he want to be left alone without NATO influence? Well, interesting you say that, because Trump said that part of his phone call Putin was Putin actually does want to come back into the international community. And obviously their economy is actually under a lot of pressure and so in decline. So I think Putin does want to get out of that stigma. And I think he possibly underestimated the fact that the Europeans were going to go for an forever war, right? So I think he may have estimated that. When he first went to Kiev, I remember that big military force that went there. It all got stuck and just stood there. I think he may have been trying to get a deal done with that, but no deal was coming because I think he did underestimate how crazy some of these Western leaders were, even though what he was doing was kind of crazy too. The only justification he has, which I think is fair, is that NATO was moving towards the border of Russia, and they didn't want that to happen. And of course, Russia, the Western Alliance, had agreed not to do that in the decades ahead. So if you've ever seen a video of that, you can see where they kept on adding countries after countries, and that's why the United States has come out with with Hedgehog here, the secretary saying no, Ukraine's not coming into NATO. Because that really is a declaration of war from their point of view, because it's sitting right on the border of Russia. So there's a no to that. We've got Wookie in the house there, back from the rave to be here. Hey, good to see you, Wookie, and welcome back. Pam Bondi did great during her this is a new DOG speech and killed it. Yeah. So talking about Pam Bondi, that's really back to a lot of domestic stuff here in the United States. Pam Bondi, of course, becoming the Attorney General. She is a super smart woman, a very successful prosecutor from Florida, and she's going to be doing a lot of Trump's domestic agenda there, particularly around border control, and also probably the main thing, putting criminals in prison. The weirdest thing with Democrats is they let out prisoners, they let out people to go kill, rape, and maim. I mean, it's the most hideous thing I've ever seen, and people vote for them. I don't know, but Pam Bondi is going to put them in jail and make America safer. So very excited about where that's going with Pam Bondi. Really, really good there. Woogie says, and on the speed up to catch up. Nice one, Woogie. It's a good thing about YouTube, right? Postia says, online sports betting on trans women and women's sports was a moneymaker. Bring back Biden, says back in there. Yeah, well, you can get lots of warped things from him. Do you think a nuclear weapon will be used in the next 100 years? I do, actually, but I do. I actually think that a nuclear weapon will be used in the next 100 years. There's a number of countries, a number of reasons why for that. There's probably a video on itself. Please sell plows more, Jeet, says Optimality. Yeah, nice. Well, actually, India is going to get F-35s from the United States. So the president of India came. He was one of the first ones too. So let's go have a look at that. So India, we talked about China. Now China's been on the phone. They've talked with President Trump. And so we'll see where that heads. And of course, particularly around tariffs and other things like that. China's response, of course, is often through its actions. And that's what I mean. It was down in Australia there trying to cause trouble and still is there as far as I know. Now, India, of course, the Modi, the Prime Minister of India, went and saw Trump at the White House as well, pretty quickly following after I think it was after the King of Jordan and the Israeli Prime Minister. And of course, they have a very good relationship with the United States. So they're making a lot of deals, including F-35. So if you haven't seen India, India's been militarizing a lot. They have their own aircraft carriers. They have a big navy, and they are really militarizing a lot. Now, India is typically the neutral country, right? Russia and China everyone is trying to court India, Russia and China, the United States, because they're such a big country, biggest population, right? Slightly bigger than China, about 1.4 billion people. China is probably about 1.2, 1.3. Remember, China's population was revised down a couple of years ago by about 100 million people. But China, there's still no one militarizing a lot. Now, obviously, there's detractors inside India. India has its own issues. There's northern Indians and southern Indians, right? Southern Indians are pretty well known, pretty friendly. Northern Indians, of course, up there towards Pakistan. So you've got issues there. And of course, between the different religions, Hindu and Islam and stuff like that going on. So you've got a lot of issues there. And then, of course, there's the border against China and India, where they've had a lot of gun conflicts, right, up Nepal and stuff like that. So there's a lot of issues going on the borders there between China and between Pakistan. So India's got a lot of their own issues. Now, one thing with India's been doing population imperialism. So their population has been spreading around the world, particularly into the United States, into Australia, New Zealand. So there's a lot of imperialistic expansion through population expansion, something that we've seen from China as well. China and India, obviously with huge populations, using that to disperse their populations in other countries. But if you're in a small country, that doesn't take long for them to take over your country. So that's kind of what's happening there. China is taking over, political positions, but also they're expanding, both China and India taking over New Zealand and Australia as well. So our countries have been taken over there and let in through globalists. Who lets them in? globalists, right? So people of our own country who are globalists let them in, and they take over eventually. That's what we're seeing at the moment, particularly the last year or two. So that's going on there at the moment. What else we got going? Let's have a look. We got Richie Robinson. Salute, Superman. I appreciate that. Big shout out there, Richie. But Vanessa says America just sells its planes and jets to whoever wants. Well, actually, it's pretty strategic with who it sells planes from. Doesn't let them out to everybody. It certainly sells F-35s to. So these are top stealth planes. If people not aware, they're kind of the top generation. There are new planes coming out. There's, I think, European tried to make their own plane that's out there too. The Chinese made their own plane, sort of advanced plane, but F-35 still thinks the best out there and mass produced. And and now they're just selling to India. So India's getting them as well, all part of that alliance, right? I think everybody is trying to really caught India there. India is obviously expanding its own footprint, as we call it. What else we got there? But for next year, North Koreans can't make sushi. Is that why they kidnapped the Japanese? I don't know. It was pretty sure in the 50s, I think a lot of that stuff was happening. And I don't think they've seen a lot of them, right? I'm just looking at the map on your screen. Man, if the US could just secure Canada and Greenland, it would be quite the landmass compared to the rest of the world. Yeah, so that's a very important point. And, obviously Trump has talked about Canada being the 51st state of the United States. Obviously, Alaska up the top there is already part of the United States. So obviously Trump is going to try to unify that, also wanting to buy Greenland or take over Greenland if they vote. Obviously, Greenland is under the protection of Denmark. But of course, Denmark is under protection of the United States, so it's kind of a bit weird, isn't it? But if Trump has got a big vision, if he gets Canada, if he gets Greenland, that would make a very powerful alliance there, and of course, seal the resources and the shipping lanes, right? And therefore give a lot of sovereign justice or rationality to be able to defend that whole area. So that's Trump's vision, and very smart move, to be honest. We know that a lot of polling in Greenland, a lot of the people would be keen to go to the United States, but of course, Denmark there, protesting a bit about that. Obviously, we've seen some pretty funny behavior from France. France going to Denmark saying, "Hey, we'll protect you from the United States." I mean, come on. The only thing they could ever do is try to nuke the United States. That would be a very bad idea for everybody. So yeah, it's not probably going to happen there. Now, obviously, Canada has its own issues. Got their Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, destroyed Canada over the last 8 years. Really is a horrible, horrible leader. Very narcissistic sociopath. And of course, we're hoping that in the next elections with Poilievre, that he gets to become the Prime Minister and we get a common sense conservative putting Canada back on track. Now, obviously, Poilievre is a Canadian, puts Canadian first, so he wouldn't really want Canada to become the 51st state of the United States. Trump, of course, talking about it becoming the 51st state of Canada because he calls Trudeau Governor Trudeau. And, of course, Trudeau there has actually suspended the government, right, and kind of resigned. But basically, he's now a dictator and Parliament is not in session. It's the most bizarre tyranny you could think of. Very sinister tyranny happening in Canada with Justin Trudeau. But he's a narcissist. He's a crazy, selfish guy. And so it's just another strategy to hold on to power there. So hopefully it all sorts it out in the end. A few months from now, hopefully. I know that a lot of that stuff's been challenged in the Supreme Court, I think it is equivalent in Canada. So we'll see what happens there in Canada. But in the meantime, Trump obviously pressuring about troops on the border, about cutting back methamphetamine, which is killing, like I say, 200 to 300,000 Americans a year. Terrible drug, very dangerous drug, right? I think apparently like a cup of it can kill like 1 million people or something nuts. It's really a crazy drug. So pretty crazy. Meanwhile, so on the northern border, on the southern border, of course, you got the cartels acting up, talking big. And of course, the cartels are pretty contaminated through the United States. So they've got politicians, they've got lots of stuff like that. So the United States is going to have to clean up in the interior from cartel corruption, and they are doing that. But they're also going to have to then they're also on the offensive to some degree. And now they've got Mexican troops going to the border as well, something like 10,000 Mexican troops helping protect the border there. And that hopefully will, reduce cartel behavior there. Remember, cartels have been earning just billions of billions, have been trafficking millions and millions of people. And of course, the amount of human trafficking and abuse of women and children has been very, very high. And they often, even when they get to the United States, they are bonded slaves, right? So even kids working in factories or sexual work, and of course they have to pay back the cartels. So it's a very much a dark thing, and so Trump's coming in to bring some light to that. And also there's about 300,000 kids that are missing, and Trump's found about 70 to 80,000 of those and continuing to look for the rest of them. Part of the deal in New York today was done that, right, from the Tsar. I'm not sure if it's on this list, but let's have a look here. Tom Homan, Homan there. So yeah, it's not on the list here, but the border Tsar, Tom Homan there in New York, trying to sort out getting the worst of the worst there. Because obviously they're huge cartel gangs in there in New York, so they've got to clean out all that. Make New York a lot safer. Obviously, they put a lot of police now in New York, and trying to look at the subways there to clean them up after people were throwing people in front of trains and all sorts of ghastly things. So a lot of stuff happening there for the Trump administration. So pretty cool. Let's quickly talk about some of these. Obviously, Secretary of the Interior has been announced there. He's also part of the Energy Committee. So they're going to be doing big things around the energy and getting tapping the energy. Like I say, today in the United States, the Louisiana there's just announced that they're going ahead with the LNG terminal. And of course, that's as part of the big energy boom that's going to happen in the United States. And of course, it's going to have about 9 months maybe to build. And that will be added to the other terminals. I think there's about 13 or 14 in the United States, if I remember rightly. You can double check me on that. But they process a lot of the Canadian stuff as well, and also supply the West Coast from the East Coast of Canada through the United States piping system. So that's big business there. Trump also today announced in domestic policy that they're going to open up the federal land and the offshore land to get oil and gas, and that's huge. They're also going to be opening up chemicals as well. So if you look at the United States map, pretty much on the West Coast, you have a lot of transport and technology that's developed, consumer tech that's mostly along the East Coast there. On the bottom, the South there, you've got a lot of oil and gas, particularly produced there in a lot of the states. And then moving up to the West Coast there, East Coast, you've got a lot of chemicals, technology, and transport is typically the biggest manufacturing there along the East Coast. There's quite a lot of variety on the East Coast there, but that's some of the main ones here. In the North, of course, you also have oil and gas. You obviously, Michigan and stuff like that, you obviously have manufacturing, a lot of vehicles and stuff like that. That's going to be boom. So it's going to boom as well. In the middle of the United States, obviously, you have a lot of agriculture, and that's going to grow as well as oil as well. So, it's going to be boom time. I definitely think we've already seen some huge milestones there for the domestic policy, obviously closing the borders. But in terms of domestic policy there, really opening up manufacturing, obviously with the tariffs, going to have reciprocal tariffs, also going to use that income to feed the incentive to manufacture within the United States. So Trump drawing in all these billionaires and all these big companies to come into the United States and boom up United States manufacturing. To do that, of course, you need raw materials as well. So he's putting tariffs on steel and aluminum, and so that's going to be pretty useful for the inputs into production, right? So you can see he's doing the whole production line, and that's going to be massive. So he's gearing up for the golden age of the United States, and I think people in 4 years' time will be shocked at what he's achieved by then. We're going to be going across from infrastructure at the moment. Under the bipartisan agreement, there was about $1 trillion put up for infrastructure. About 40%, I think 45% that's been used already. And of course, I think Trump's going to accelerate that to enlarge that. And that's going to be huge for the United States. So I think a lot of infrastructure has not been done. So we're talking about roads and bridges, talking about internet, all sorts of infrastructure you can imagine is going to be boom time in the United States. It's going to create tons of jobs and require a lot of skilled workers with higher wages. It's going to be pretty important there. With the energy, of course, supply, getting more gas and oil, it's going to lower the cost of inputs to the whole US economy. That's going to lower inflation. It's going to be huge. Meanwhile, of course, with the Dodge there, he's focused on getting rid of potentially trillions of dollars of ridiculous spending. And I think that's going to be massive too. And if he can do that, reduce the federal government, increase the private sector, then you're going to be able to reduce the inflationary pressure there on that spending, while also increasing the GDP of the country and therefore create a lower inflationary environment. So this is pretty pretty much the big plan he's got there for the United States. And in addition to that, he's obviously going to bring in all the latest new tech. So we'll talk about AI building. He's put in well over $500 billion there, investment in AI that's going to the United States. That's going to have a number of applications across the board. We're going to see robotics expanded as well. We're going to see obviously the space age ramped up there with his partnership with Elon Musk. So lots of things are coming to the United States across all the latest technologies. And so, I think the United States is going to be a beacon of top performance there, and that golden age is definitely coming. And it's probably going to take maybe 9 months to 12 months for that initial impact to be felt, like in a big way, and then it's just going to accelerate after that, probably pretty exponentially. So yeah, fun times coming to the United States there. The golden age is truly coming. So it's going to be a lot of fun. What else? We got a couple more comments in the chat. Let's have a look at those. Let's see, we got Optimality there, finally fighting back against the New World Order, 100%. Hey, the New World Order is real. Obviously, you've got players like Soros, billionaires like Soros. You've got the Democrats of the United States, all globalists. You've got the European Union with a lot of unelected bureaucrats, all globalists, and they're all authoritarians and narcissists. They're full of narcissists as well. They really don't care about people. And of course, you can see that with their policies. They let all the criminals go, and they put all the innocent people in jail. And so we're seeing that in the UK with Starmer, the Prime Minister, there as well. So it is real, and Trump is going to be gutting it. So getting rid of the federal, redesigning the federal system in the United States, going to get rid of a lot of deep state automatically. We also see at universities, right? So universities, Trump said, get rid of your DEI. So what do they do? Delete the name DEI, but they keep all the positions, right? So you're going to have this quiet fight back. So they're going to have to dig deeper to get rid of a lot of these, controlling tactics like gender identity, all controlling mechanisms, right? And the globalists kind of laugh at all the stupid people that follow it because they go, "Oh, you guys are just falling for our easy control tactics," and so on. So yeah, the pushback's real. And but hey, look, it's not going to be without this resistance that I just talked about. We got News Gaming and House there. Nice late show. I appreciate that. Big shout out. India has like 1.5 billion. Yeah, I see people talking about 1.5. I just heard the Prime Minister Modi saying 1.4 today in the White House. So that's where I got my number from the Prime Minister Modi himself. But yes, 1.5 is what I used to hear as well. Anna Paulina Luna is running the task force to declassify federal agent secrets. Yeah, excited. Yeah. So we're going to get the JFK files. We're going to get the Epstein files through that. So yeah, that's a big deal there. But Finesse, well said. We've got Optimality in the house there. Lol. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, Trump going to war with the cartels. Now, that's going to be something that's going to ramp up. So they're not expecting that all in one go, but they definitely have special forces available to them to do certain missions. So, cartels will have to, cartels are already frustrated, apparently, because they've already locked down like 90% of the human traffic flow. So they're already upset because they were making billions and billions of dollars. And what kickbacks were people in the Democrat and the Biden party getting from the cartels? I bet you there's tons of it. So yeah, they've got to unpick all the corruption in the United States as well as be on the front foot with those cartels on the Mexican and Southern America there. Mega, make England great again? Is it? Make Europe great again? I think is the one you're saying. Yeah. Correct on all counts. I think it's Tim Hill. Thanks very much. It's hard for them to pretend it's not real at this point with the reaction to Trump, 100%. Yeah. You got the Democrats out on the street protesting about, the fact that the US aid is being exposed for what it is, funding all the left-wing propaganda, not just the United States, but all the way down here in good old little New Zealand. That money's been made here. Hundreds of millions of dollars of American taxpayer money coming to New Zealand just to indoctrinate and propagandize New Zealand people with left-wing nonsense. It is disgusting, but that's what we knew they were doing. They still use words like diversity and equity, even if they change the name. That's right, to bridge. That's exactly right, Tim. Make Earth great again, says Optimality. Well, we're hoping that it certainly has a lot of influence here in Australia and New Zealand. Now, some countries are not free, right? So Canada at the moment, it's got progressive globalist Trudeau, so it's kind of not free yet, but Trump's putting pressure there. Obviously in France, we've still got Macron, so still progressive globalists there, still got problems there. We've got still problems in Spain. Spain's government's a bit of a mixed bag as well. I'm not sure about Portugal. I'm not too up to date with Portugal, but definitely Spain and Germany, obviously. Still got globalist progressives there, all part of the EU setup. And they don't want to let go of power. They don't want to let go. So they want to put their globalist project into play. They want to enslave everybody, right? Well, they do it because they get to be at the top, right? They get to be at the top. So a whole ton of narcissists on their side. Yeah, pretty crazy. So we've got that. Poland, of course, is conservative. We've got maybe some hope in France if Le Pen can win, but France is split three ways, right? So you've got the globalists in the middle. You've got the left socialists on one side, and then you've got the populists, conservatives on the other side, Le Pen. So we're hoping to see, hopefully, she's getting stronger and stronger every election, but let's see. Now, if it's not her, it could be her daughter. So we'll see how that goes in France. Now, obviously, Italy has already got a relatively conservative Melina, I think it's Melina there, but she's a mixed bag from my point of view. But she's definitely done something to help protect Italy, to remain Italy there, but not still a lot of crime. Now, the problem with a lot of this immigration, they come into the country and then they cause crime all over the place. And you're like, well, can't you just come in and be a good citizen? If you're coming in illegally, at least you could be a good citizen. But no, they're coming in and doing pickpocketing, muggings, raping, all sorts of terrible crimes. It really is horrific. Sweden, of course, is really bad. They have hand grenade explosions, bombings, and all sorts of stuff every week, and it's horrendous, and all because of immigration. All of Europe is suffering from that. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. The only place that Poland, which hasn't let people in, hasn't done that, although they've got people trying to get into their country all the time. But of course, they try to hunt them down if they do breach the fences there. So it's kind of play at the moment on that one. Now, we haven't talked much about North Africa, but North Africa's got a lot of issues. We've got a lot of Islamic terrorists and independent groups in the North Africa trying to seize power. So we've got a lot of those issues happening. So that's happening across Northern Africa. So there's quite a bit of conflict there. Now, that's often had that. If you remember, the French used to go in there in Mali to get the Islamic extremists out there, but they have resurged in here as well, like they have, in Syria. So we'll see what they end. They're probably a lot worse here in North Africa. So let's fingers crossed that they can be contained to some degree. But at the moment, they are causing a lot of havoc in North Africa. Meanwhile, in South Africa, you may have heard about this, but the ANC running there and the second party is causing a lot of stuff there. Kill the Boer, kill the white man, which is just we're trying to be in a world where we get along with each other, and you've still got people running around going, "Let's kill you" just because of the color of your skin. And so there we go. South Africa is a big problem, and of course Trump there has talked about sanctioning South Africa and also offering them refugee status for the Afrikaners. Now, Afrikaners are not interested for the most part. There's been some take up, I think about 17,000 or so that have been interested in taking refugee status in the United States. But most Afrikaners there are not interested. Now, there's two types of white men in South Africa from memory. There's Afrikaners and then there's the English, right? The English version. And so the Afrikaners there pretty much, they've been there for hundreds of years, and so they want to stay there. And they've got a pretty unique culture there, a sort of a Dutch South African mix, right? So it's quite unique. And so they're in South Africa there. And of course, they offer, just like Zimbabwe, they offer a lot of, they grow a lot of the food. They're very good at engineering, all that sort of stuff. They're very good at making things really nice. And so they're pretty pivotal. And remember that, in Zimbabwe, that when they got rid of all the white farmers, the economy collapsed and food production collapsed. And of course, then they end up begging them to come back. And they have to come back and then have to redo the land again because the land's done to ruin. And then they can feed the people. So South Africa going a little bit of that as well. Now, if you're not familiar with Durban in South Africa there, that's completely running down. Beautiful, used to be a magnificent city, now is run down. It's got buildings collapsing, rubbish everywhere, utilities not running. It is horrific. So you might see some little cool videos of South Africa, but there's actually a lot of bad things happening there, and it's deteriorating. And what's the ideology that's coming here? Well, it's the same thing that's coming to through a lot of globalist movements, which is socialism, right? And socialism destroys. We see that in the 20th century. It causes great poverty and enslavement of the people. Now, it always comes in different forms and shapes and sizes, but it's essentially the same thing. And that is this idea of equity, removing, equality and removing opportunity. So it pretty much becomes tyranny, and you end up with an elite class that does all sorts of corruption and then they enslave the rest of the people. So it's very similar to globalism, the socialism. They kind of got this really weird alliance, just like progressives do with Islamists, right? So because they share some common values. So that is pretty interesting. So we got that happening in Africa there at the moment. So yeah, pretty crazy world. Obviously, Australia's got the Labour Party, they're kind of socialists in there as well. There's no good options to vote for because even the Liberal Party in Australia have got a lot of similar policies there, and most of them are slowly eroding Australia's wealth, safety and security, and immigration coming in from cultures that are not compatible. And this is the biggest problem. And of course, then they make laws to stop you from criticizing it, and they put you in jail rather than people causing the crime. So it's the usual playbook from globalists and socialists. They like to enslave people there. And of course, in New Zealand, we've got a similar thing. We've obviously just got rid of socialist government, which ruined our economy, and put into place a form of apartheid and all sorts of crazy nonsense. And then now we've also got a new government, which is supposed to kind of save us, but they end up kind of being the light version of the old Labour Party. And so they're also destroying New Zealand as well. And of course, opened up to record immigration. Now, we've got a very small population down here in New Zealand. It's about 5.3 million people, but already a third of the people are now foreign born. So that means that people like me with my accent, they're going to become rarer and rarer and rarer. Because it's going to be taken over, particularly by Indians and Chinese, part of the Indian and Chinese imperialism that's going on in the world at the moment, not just New Zealand, but Australia as well. And it's particularly opened up over the last 2 years. So this is quite aligned with the UN replacement program. So if you haven't gone to the UN, you can see the replacement program there. And they've just started ramping that up in Australia and New Zealand, as well as Canada. Canada's been well into it for quite some time, and so is the UK. So if you see the UK is getting a lot of troubles there. You got something like 150 to 300,000 knife attacks in London every year. And of course, you know how many go unreported as well. Even people in upper areas, like these are the rich areas, it's not safe even walking in those areas now in the UK because crime is so bad. And the reason it's so bad is because they bring in a lot of incompatible cultures with the not same values. So it's not about skin color. It's really about what's your culture, and the cultures are not all equal, right? So you bring in a culture that has a propensity for crime, they're going to do that, right? If they think that child marriage is something that's legal, and you think it's illegal, they come in and they just ignore your laws, right? So you got a lot of those things happening in the UK. So there's a pretty interesting alliance between progressives and Islamists at the moment because they share a lot of common values, and so that's kind of what we're under threat there at the moment. So it's a pretty crazy world, and Trump coming in here, dealing with domestic policy, and I think he's going to blow people's minds with what he's going to achieve. We've also obviously let's see whether he ends up getting anything like Greenland inside the United States as the 52nd state or 51st state. And I'm not so confident about Canada, but Greenland's definitely a possibility. So we'll keep a lookout for that. But you never know with Trump. Let's see what happens here. Now, obviously, Canada, I believe, has a constitution, has votes, so it's got very advanced modern society, even if it's been largely many parts of it destroyed by the Canadian Prime Minister. I mean, they're very well indebted, and obviously they face a lot of cultural problems there as well. And so we'll see where they end up there for Canadians. Now, you got to remember that New Zealand, Australia, and Canada, these are pretty welcoming, soft cultures. So it's easy to take over those countries because they're not really going to stand up and complain. Now, it's a lot more difficult if you're in Poland. Poland's on the other side, right? They're very strong with their identity. There's no hell in the high water they would let go of their culture if they can help it. You got to remember, Poland survived World War II, where the Germans and the Russians were killing Polish people by the millions, and so they really have a pretty strong identity there. So let's see where that goes. So that's some of the stuff there around global politics, Trump, United States, and the world. I thought we'd get on there and have a bit of fun talking about all the world problems. Obviously, we can't do anything about it or solve it, but let's see if Trump can. Maloney, yeah, for Italy, yeah, Maloney there, Tim. Well said. And most Afrikaners are deeply tied to that land. Absolutely, Tim. They are indeed. Andrew says equal outcomes imposed by the state. Yeah. That's right. And of course, that creates also perversions there. And my gender identity and all that sort of stuff is all just tools of control. I swear the globalists must laugh at all this. The socialists. I always see socialists as as fools for the globalists. The globalists must sit back while they're in their billion-dollar homes laughing their heads off at these socialists that fall for all those traps. And of course, socialists love these control mechanisms and enslaving the people through all the different means that they have. And they make more and more of them up. Have you noticed that? They're always coming out with new terms. They like to take common words as well, take common words and use those against you. And so therefore they enslave you that way. It's pretty crazy stuff. But hey, look, there's a lot of bad people out there in the world. And it's not just the obvious criminals. It's the globalist criminals, socialist criminals out there too. And of course, we've seen the 20th century should have taught us enough about that, but apparently not. So here we are reliving it again. It's funny, it's not too long after the World War II, people have passed on from the world that we're repeating the same old stuff again. Isn't that weird as well? All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed an hour and 10 minutes. I think it's a good place to finish. Global politics, Trump, United States, and the world. Probably do another video like this in the future. It's a bit of fun to go through, and we'll probably talk about a few more other stuff in here as well. All right, take care, everybody. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.